Today, Camilla Parker Bowles ignited one of the most serious internal disputes the monarchy has faced in years. In early March 2026, Camilla, along with her son Tom Parker Bowles, quietly pushed a bold and controversial idea. Camilla plans to evict Anne and her family from their home of decades in order to brazenly seize Gatcombe Park, to transform Gatcombe Park into a high-end commercial equestrian resort. Gatcombe Park, the longtime residence of Princess Anne, a property of deep symbolic and personal historical significance to the royal family. Camilla's argument, reportedly presented in private discussions with Charles III, was remarkably pragmatic. Gatcombe Park is not just a residence, it is an underutilized economic asset. Why Gatcombe Park matters. To understand the scale of the controversy, one must first understand the unique value of Gatcombe Park. Far from being a quiet countryside retreat, the estate is internationally recognized within elite equestrian circles. It serves as the venue for the prestigious Festival of British Eventing, drawing top riders, trainers, and sponsors from across Europe and beyond. Its infrastructure is already world-class. Professional-grade training arenas, competition-standard cross-country courses, extensive grazing land, and equine facilities. But beyond sport, Gatcombe Park is a multi-layered estate comprising a central manor house, Princess Anne's residence, administrative and operational buildings, agricultural zones with active land use, fully equipped equestrian competition grounds. To Camilla, this is not heritage, it is potential capital. The business case behind the conflict. Insiders suggest that Camilla's pitch is built on a clear financial vision. Transform Gatcombe Park into a premium equestrian resort and event complex, capable of generating tens of millions annually. With Tom Parker Bowles contributing expertise in high-end culinary branding and Laura Lopes offering direction in art, aesthetics, and lifestyle design, the proposal reportedly includes luxury accommodations for elite guests, international competition hosting rights, VIP experiential tourism packages, fine dining and curated cultural events. In private conversations, Camilla is said to have described the estate as a self-sustaining royal asset, a modern revenue engine aligned with global luxury markets, a legal argument with dangerous implications. But perhaps the most controversial aspect of Camilla's position is not financial, it is legal. She is believed to be leveraging a critical historical detail. Gatcombe Park was purchased in 1976 by Elizabeth II, using personal funds, and subsequently gifted to Princess Anne as a wedding present. This distinction, Camilla argues, means the estate is not part of the Crown estate that may not require Privy Council approval for restructuring. Its ownership structure could be subject to reinterpretation. More provocatively, she has reportedly suggested that Princess Anne may function not as an absolute owner, but as a long-term beneficiary under a controlled structure, potentially akin to a family trust. If that interpretation holds, it opens the door to a radical possibility. The reigning monarch could assert authority over the estate under the justification of greater institutional interest. The moment tensions became personal. What began as theory quickly became confrontation. By mid-March 2026, communications attributed to Camilla's circle reportedly reached Mike Tindall, husband of Zara Tindall. The message was clear, though never formally documented. Gatcombe Park should be prepared for transition. To many within the royal orbit, this was not merely a proposal. It was a demand issued without consensus, without protocol, and without restraint. Silence from the king, noise from the palace. Complicating matters further is the current condition of King Charles. While no official statements have clarified his stance, sources suggest he has been largely disengaged, focusing instead on ongoing health evaluations. His silence has created a vacuum, one that Camilla appears increasingly willing to fill. And that vacuum is now echoing with tension. Because for Princess Anne and those who stand with her, this is not about money, nor modernization. It is about something far more fundamental. The line between stewardship and control, a conflict just beginning. As of the 25th of March 2026, the situation remains unresolved but no longer contained. What started as a strategic vision has evolved into a legal débat, a family confrontation, and potentially a constitutional dilemma. In the next part, the reaction from within the royal family, especially from figures like Prince William and Sophie, will reveal just how deep this divide truly runs, and why, for many inside the palace, this is no longer about Gatcombe Park, but about the future of the monarchy itself, a royal family turning against one of its own. What began as quiet discomfort rapidly escalated into open resistance, as senior members of the monarchy moved to confront what they saw as an unprecedented overreach by Camilla Parker Bowles. The first line of defense: Princess Anne. At the center of the storm, Princess Anne did not respond with emotion, but with precision. Sources suggest that in a closed-door discussion around mid-March, Anne made her position unmistakably clear. Gatcombe Park is not a commercial asset. It is a personal gift from Elizabeth II, and it represents continuity, not opportunity. To Anne, the proposal was not merely inappropriate, it was fundamentally offensive. Because what Camilla framed as optimization, Anne interpreted as an attempt to reclassify legacy into leverage. William steps in. A constitutional warning. The situation took a decisive turn when Prince William entered the discussion. Unlike Anne's restrained firmness, William's stance was described as direct and strategic. In internal conversations, he reportedly raised a critical concern. If Gatcombe Park could be reinterpreted, restructured, and reclaimed under vague institutional arguments, then what prevents the same logic from being applied elsewhere? This was no longer about one estate. It was about precedent. William is said to have warned that allowing such a move would destabilize trust across royal holdings. It would blur the line between private family assets and institutional control. And most dangerously, it would signal that no royal residence is secure from reinterpretation. Catherine and Sophie, the moral argument. While legal and constitutional concerns dominated some discussions, others focused on something deeper: values. Catherine Middleton and Sophie, both widely regarded as stabilizing figures within the monarchy, reportedly expressed strong opposition. Their argument was not rooted in law, but in legacy. Gatcombe Park is tied to the personal intentions of Elizabeth II. It represents family continuity, not financial strategy. Commercializing it would risk turning heritage into spectacle. Sophie, in particular, long considered one of the late Queen's most trusted confidantes, is said to have reacted with unusual bluntness. Not everything that can generate revenue should be made to do so. This sentiment echoed quietly but powerfully across palace circles. Edward's intervention, drawing the line. Prince Edward reportedly aligned closely with Anne, reinforcing a critical boundary. Non-working royals and external family members must not influence internal royal decisions. This was a direct reference to the growing involvement of Tom Parker Bowles, Laura Lopes. Their presence in strategic discussions, particularly those involving estate planning, was seen by many as a breach of protocol, and a dangerous one at that. Edward is believed to have questioned not just the proposal but the process itself. Who authorized these discussions? On what basis were external voices included? And under whose authority were informal directives being issued? The Tindall factor. Pressure at the personal level. While tensions escalated at the top, the impact began to be felt at a more personal level. Mike Tindall and Zara Tindall found themselves in an increasingly uncomfortable position. Reports indicate that indirect pressure was applied regarding future planning for Gatcombe Park. Questions were raised about long-term occupancy rights, and subtle suggestions were made that transition would be inevitable. For Zara, an accomplished equestrian deeply connected to the estate, this was more than a logistical issue. It was personal, because unlike abstract legal arguments, Gatcombe Park represents her upbringing, her professional environment, and her family's identity, a growing perception, overreach and isolation. As these reactions converged, a narrative began to take shape within royal circles. Camilla was not simply proposing reform, she was acting beyond her mandate. Concerns included speaking in a tone perceived as representing the crown, advancing proposals without formal consultation, allowing her children to participate in sensitive internal matters. This created a perception, fair or not, of centralized influence without accountability. And in an institution built on hierarchy and restraint, that perception is dangerous. The silence that amplifies everything. Meanwhile, Charles III remained largely silent. His limited visibility, reportedly due to ongoing health monitoring, has only intensified the situation. Because in the absence of clear authority, interpretations multiply, actions go unchecked, and tensions escalate unchecked. Within palace walls, one question now circulates quietly but persistently. Is Camilla acting with the king's support, or in the space created by his silence? From disagreement to division, by the final week before March 25, what had begun as a proposal had evolved into something far more serious. A fracture between senior royals, a challenge to internal governance norms, and a test of how power is exercised within the monarchy. Lines have been drawn carefully, but unmistakably. And as the next phase unfolds, the question is no longer whether the conflict exists, but how far it will go. If the previous chapters exposed the conflict, This phase reveals the driving force behind it. A calculated, highly structured plan to transform tradition into revenue. For Camilla Parker Bowles, Gatcombe Park is no longer simply a residence tied to Princess Anne. It is, in her words, a dormant asset waiting to be activated. And behind that statement lies a detailed commercial strategy that has both impressed and alarmed those who have seen fragments of it. At the core of Camilla's argument is a fundamental shift in perspective. Not a family estate, not a symbol of continuity, but a high-value experiential destination. This reframing is built around one undeniable fact. Gatcombe Park already functions as a globally recognized equestrian venue, primarily through the Festival of British Eventing. Each year, the event attracts elite riders, international sponsors, high-net-worth spectators. To Camilla and Tom Parker Bowles, this is not just prestige, it is proof of concept. Sources familiar with the proposal describe a four-tier business structure designed to transform Gatcombe Park into a self-sustaining luxury ecosystem, expansion of equestrian competitions, hosting international championships, broadcasting and sponsorship rights. Estimated annual potential, 5 livres, sterling 10 millions. Conversion of selected estate zones into boutique accommodation, private lodges for VIP guests, exclusive membership-based access. Estimated annual potential, 3 livres, sterling 8 millions. Curated royal lifestyle experiences, horse training sessions, countryside immersion programs, heritage tours. Estimated annual potential, 2 livres, sterling 5 millions. This is where Camilla's children become central figures. Tom Parker Bowles, development of signature dining experiences, positioning Gatcombe as a gastronomic destination. Laura Lopes, artistic direction, interior aesthetics, brand identity, estimated annual potential, 5 livres, sterling plus million. When combined, internal projections suggest £15 million to £30 plus million annually. For a single estate currently used primarily as a residence and event venue, this represents a dramatic transformation. To achieve this, Gatcombe Park would undergo a phased restructuring. Phase 1, administrative centralization, transfer of operational control to a royal-managed body, introduction of commercial governance structures. Phase 2, infrastructure upgrade, renovation of auxiliary buildings, development of hospitality facilities, expansion of equestrian infrastructure. Phase 3, brand positioning, rebranding as a luxury equestrian destination, strategic partnerships with global sponsors. Phase 4, full commercial, launch, ticketed events, membership programs, international marketing campaigns. Camilla's confidence reportedly stems from 3 key assumptions. Gatcombe Park already has international recognition, established credibility in equestrian sports. This eliminates the need to build a brand from scratch. Unlike many estates, Gatcombe is already equipped for large-scale events, structurally adaptable for hospitality expansion. With Tom and Laura involved, the project gains culinary expertise, artistic direction, lifestyle branding capabilities. From Camilla's perspective, this creates a unique fusion of sport, luxury, and culture. But what appears visionary to some is deeply troubling to others. Critics within the royal family argue that this model treats heritage as a commercial asset class, risks turning a private legacy into a public spectacle, blurs the boundary between royal duty and private enterprise. More pointedly, they question the underlying philosophy. Should a gift from Elizabeth II intended as a personal residence be repurposed into a revenue-generating enterprise? As this blueprint circulates in fragments across palace discussions, a deeper question emerges. Is this truly about financial sustainability, modernization of royal assets, or is it something else entirely? Because when viewed alongside the legal arguments and pressure on Princess Anne's family, the business plan begins to look less like a proposal and more like justification for control. By the 25th of March 2026, the situation has reached a critical point. The plan is detailed, the opposition is organized, and the stakes are no longer theoretical. Because if implemented, this would not just transform Gatcombe Park, it would redefine what royal property is and what it can become. By the final weeks leading up to the 25th of March 2026, the conflict surrounding Gatcombe Park had shifted into its most dangerous phase. Not emotional, not financial, but legal. Because beneath the arguments, the accusations, and the growing hostility lies a single near-end question. Does Charles III or those speaking in his name actually have the authority to reclaim Gatcombe Park? And if not, What exactly is Camilla Parker Bowles attempting to do? The entire legal dispute hinges on one critical historical fact. In 1976, Elizabeth II purchased Gatcombe Park using her personal funds, not state or crown estate resources. She then gifted it directly to Princess Anne as a wedding present. This distinction is not symbolic, it is decisive, because it means Gatcombe Park is not part of the crown estate. It is not automatically subject to sovereign control. It does not require institutional approval for private use. In conventional legal interpretation, this would make Anne the beneficial owner, with full rights to occupy, manage, retain the estate. However, Camilla's position, quietly circulated in internal discussions, is far more aggressive. She is believed to be advancing a reinterpretation based on possible ownership structures, including family-controlled trust arrangements, nominal ownership versus operational control, implied royal oversight over high-value legacy assets. Under this framework, Gatcombe Park is reframed as a controlled royal asset temporarily allocated, not permanently transferred. This interpretation allows for a controversial conclusion that the monarch, acting in the interest of the institution, could justify reclaiming administrative control, restructuring usage rights, or even forcing a transition of occupancy. Legal advisors within palace circles are reportedly deeply divided, but many point to a fundamental flaw in Camilla's logic. A personal gift from the sovereign is not automatically reversible, unless there are explicit legal conditions attached, or the asset is held within a clearly defined trust. Without such documentation, any attempt to reclaim the estate could be seen as legally questionable, constitutionally sensitive, and potentially publicly damaging. Despite these weaknesses, Camilla's strategy appears to rely heavily on one powerful but ambiguous concept: the interest of the crown as an enduring institution. This argument suggests that individual arrangements must yield to collective benefit. High-value assets should serve long-term royal sustainability. Emotional or personal claims cannot override institutional needs. In theory, this doctrine has weight. In practice, however, it is rarely applied to private family property, especially one with such a clearly documented origin. For Princess Anne, the legal foundation remains robust. Direct transfer from Elizabeth II, decades of continuous occupation, no public record of conditional ownership. However, insiders suggest her team is not dismissing the threat entirely, because even if the law favors her, the situation is complicated by one reality. The monarchy does not operate like a typical legal system. Decisions are often shaped by internal consensus, political sensitivity, public perception, which means that even a legally weak challenge can become a practical pressure point. This is where figures like Prince William have raised serious concerns. If Gatcombe Park can be reinterpreted, reclaimed, and repurposed, then what stops similar actions involving other gifted estates, long-held or family-specific arrangements? The fear is clear. A single precedent could destabilize the entire structure of royal property rights. Another major point of contention is the involvement of Tom Parker Bowles, Lauda Lops. From a legal perspective, their participation raises serious questions. They hold no official royal authority. They are not part of institutional governance, yet they are reportedly influencing discussions around asset control. This has led to internal accusations that the process itself may be as problematic as the proposal. If the situation continues to intensify, several scenarios could emerge. Anne retains the estate. Commercial plans are abandoned or scaled back. Partial commercialization without transfer of ownership. Shared management structures, the most controversial outcome, would likely trigger internal rebellion, public backlash, media scrutiny. Ultimately, the greatest danger may not lie in courtrooms or documents, but in perception. Because if the public begins to believe that royal property can be reclaimed for profit, family members can be displaced for strategy, then the monarchy risks losing something far more valuable than land: its moral legitimacy. As of the 25th of March 2026, no formal legal action has been confirmed, but the lines have been drawn. Interpretation versus tradition, authority versus restraint, power versus principle. And at the center of it all stands Gatcombe Park, not just as land, but as a test case. Because if this line is crossed, it will not simply redefine ownership. It will redefine what it means to belong inside the royal family. By the time the calendar approached the 25th of March 2026, the conflict over Gatcombe Park had moved far beyond legal theory or financial ambition. It had become something far more volatile. A deeply personal rupture, one that is quietly redrawing the emotional map of the royal family. At the center of that rupture stands Camilla Parker Bowles, no longer viewed simply as a controversial strategist, but increasingly as a divisive force within the monarchy itself. For Princess Anne, the situation has hardened into something unmistakable, not negotiation, but defense. Those familiar with her stance describe a shift in tone over recent weeks, from measured disagreement to quiet resistance, and now to uncompromising defiance. Because for Anne, Gatcombe Park is not just a residence, a working estate, or even a legacy asset. It is a personal inheritance of trust from Elizabeth II, and any attempt to reframe it as negotiable is seen as a direct challenge not only to her authority, but to the Queen's intent. If Anne represents institutional resistance, then Zara Tindall and Mike Tindall represent the human cost of this conflict. Behind closed doors, sources suggest, Zara has reacted with controlled anger, Mike with growing frustration at being drawn into internal pressure. The issue is not merely legal, it is existential, because under the logic being advanced by Camilla's camp, Zara's lack of royal title is being used as a basis for exclusion. Her connection to Gatcombe Park is being reframed as temporary, not legitimate. For someone whose identity is deeply tied to the estate, both personally and professionally, this is perceived as an attempt to erase belonging through technicality. Among all the reactions, that of Prince William has been the most consequential. Unlike earlier phases, where his concerns were strategic, this stage reveals something more personal. William is said to have drawn a clear internal boundary. Family integrity cannot be sacrificed for financial gain. This position carries weight not only because of his future role as monarch, but because it reflects a broader generational shift from preservation of hierarchy to preservation of credibility and trust. Insiders suggest that William's frustration is no longer limited to the proposal itself, but extends to the manner in which it has been advanced, the involvement of non-royal actors, and the perceived marginalization of Anne's position. In parallel, Catherine Middleton and Sophie have emerged as quiet but firm defenders of tradition. Their influence is subtle but significant. They are said to have reinforced a critical message within internal discussions. The monarchy's strength lies in continuity, not reinvention for profit. Legacy must be protected, not repurposed. And above all, family cohesion must not be compromised by ambition. Sophie, in particular, is believed to have taken this personally given her close relationship with Elizabeth II. To her, the proposal represents not just a strategic shift, but a reinterpretation of the late Queen's intentions without her consent. As opposition consolidates, a noticeable shift has begun to occur. Camilla is becoming increasingly isolated within the royal inner circle. Concerns being quietly voiced include overstepping informal boundaries, acting without clear mandate, allowing personal networks to influence royal decisions. More critically, her children, Tom Parker Bowles, Laura Lopes, are now being seen not as contributors, but as symbols of inappropriate influence. This perception has intensified criticism that the issue is no longer just about Gatcombe Park, but about who gets to shape royal decisions. Amid all of this, Charles III remains the most consequential and most enigmatic figure. His limited visibility, reportedly linked to ongoing health monitoring, has created a vacuum that continues to widen. And in that vacuum, actions are interpreted, motivations are questioned, alliances are tested. The central question remains unresolved. Is Camilla acting with the king's quiet approval or beyond it? Until that question is answered, uncertainty will continue to fuel tension. While much of this conflict remains internal, its implications extend far beyond royal residences. If the situation becomes public in full detail, the risks are significant. Perception of ambition over duty, accusations of overreach and opportunism, questions about internal governance, concerns over commercialization of heritage, potential erosion of public trust. By late March 2026, one reality is becoming increasingly clear. This is no longer a disagreement that can be quietly managed. It is personal, structural, and deeply symbolic, because at its core, the conflict is not just about land, law, or money. It is about who defines the future of the monarchy and at what cost. As the 25th of March 2026 arrives, the battle over Gatcombe Park has reached a near-end moment, one where every possible outcome carries consequences that extend far beyond a single estate. What began as a proposal has now evolved into a confrontation that forces the royal family to answer a defining question. Will power be used to preserve tradition or to reshape it entirely? At the center of this near-end turning point remains Camilla Parker Bowles, whose actions have now set in motion a chain reaction that may be impossible to reverse. If Camilla continues to advance her plan leveraging influence over Charles III, or acting in his perceived name, the consequences could be immediate and severe. A forced administrative takeover of Gatcombe Park would trigger direct confrontation with Princess Anne, unified resistance from senior royals, including Prince William, a potential public scandal once details inevitably emerge. But beyond the visible conflict lies a deeper risk. The monarchy could be seen as prioritizing profit over principle. Such a perception would not fade quickly. It would redefine how the public interprets royal ownership, family loyalty, and institutional integrity. Equally plausible is a coordinated internal response, with opposition already forming around Catherine Middleton, Sophie, Prince Edward. A unified stance could force Camilla into retreat either formally or informally. In this scenario, Gatcombe Park remains under Anne's control. Commercial plans are abandoned, and a quiet internal understanding restores balance. However, even in retreat, damage would remain, because once such a proposal is made and such lines are crossed, trust does not fully return. The most complex outcome would be a negotiated compromise. Partial commercialization, shared oversight structures, limited development of the estate. On paper, this may appear reasonable. In reality, it risks prolonging tension, blurring authority, and creating ongoing friction between factions. Because at its core, this conflict is not about logistics, it is about control. And control, once contested, is rarely shared peacefully. Regardless of the outcome, one reality is becoming increasingly clear. Camilla's position within the royal family has been fundamentally altered. If she proceeds, she risks isolation at the highest levels. Her reputation may shift from resilience to overreach. If she retreats, her authority may be quietly diminished. Her influence in future decisions may be permanently reduced. Even more critically, the involvement of Tom Parker Bowles, Laura Lopez, has already raised lasting concerns about boundaries and legitimacy. For Charles III, the stakes are perhaps the most painful, because regardless of his level of involvement, the outcome will reflect on him. If he supports Camilla, he risks alienating key members of his own family. He may be seen as endorsing commercial overreach. If he opposes her, he risks personal fracture at the highest level of his private life. And if he remains silent, he risks appearing absent at a moment that demands leadership. For Princess Anne, this is no longer just a dispute, it is a defining stand. If Gatcombe Park were ever to be taken or repurposed, she would lose not just a residence, but a symbol of trust from Elizabeth II. Her family, including Zara Tindall and Mike Tindall, would face displacement. But more than that, it would send a message that even the most respected and disciplined members of the royal family are not beyond internal challenge. By the end of March 2026, one truth has become unavoidable. This conflict is not really about Gatcombe Park. It is about how power is exercised, who is allowed to influence decisions, and what the monarchy chooses to represent in a modern world. Because in an era where public scrutiny is constant, the monarchy survives not through authority alone, but through perceived legitimacy. If Camilla's vision represents the future, a monarchy that embraces commercialization, efficiency, and asset optimization, then Anne's resistance represents something equally powerful: the belief that some things are not meant to be monetized. Between those two visions lies a tension that cannot easily be resolved. And as this chapter closes, the question remains: will the monarchy evolve into a modern enterprise, or remain a guardian of tradition? Because in choosing one, it may irrevocably change the other.